Hello, good morning and welcome to New Forest Morphs. I hope everyone's having a good day. It is almost midday and I've been in the facility today having a good look at all my animals. And fortunately, because it's Friday, we normally find that Friday is a very low cleaning day. So what I've been doing today is I've been enjoying the sociability of my snakes. I've been opening up the tubs, I've been allowing them to explore, I've been enjoying them, and this is the fun part of the hobby, isn't it, when we're not having to do so much work but we can actually enjoy the snakes. And I hope everyone else out there is starting to ease up a little bit on the work side. I know it's going to be busy over the next few days getting ready for Christmas, but it'd be lovely to have a little bit of a break to look forward to. We're looking forward to our break. It's still full on our businesses at the moment. Jared and Jess are still quite poorly, and thank you so much everyone for your love and prayers, and we do really appreciate that. And thank you also for the feedback on yesterday's video, because it went out quite late last night, and so maybe a lot of the UK subscribers and followers haven't had a chance to see it, but we talked about snake therapy and we talked about mental health considerations, and if you haven't had a chance to have a look at them, please do have a look. I felt it was something that would be beneficial to the community, and I hope it helps in some way. Today we're going to be looking at a second phase of mental health, but we're going to be looking at the mental health of our animals rather than ourselves today. And I've been putting some thought into this. I've been thinking very seriously about this for many months, and I've got lots of different experimental ideas that I'm considering. And it was I'll tell you who's been inspiring me to look at the behaviour aspects is a recently new person. I've just subscribed to her channel, Lori, and she's got some amazing videos out there. She's a professional behaviourist in animals. She's doing a master's degree. I think she's in her finals, so we wish you well with that, Lori. I'll give the links to her channel if you want to learn a little bit more about behaviour and some of the tests and experiments she's done. And she also talks about setting up a do-it-yourself vivarium for our snakes, including ball pythons. She keeps quite a few ball pythons, so I think it's very relevant. I'm in the process of sourcing all the materials for my play area. I'm going to build a play area vivarium, which I think I've already spoken about. And I think it's lovely to see one or two other breeders out there being open-minded to enter experiments, because it's all very new field for us all and we're kind of trying to learn. I know many of us have got concerns about the regulators perhaps regulating larger vivariums in our snake hobby, and I think that can build fear of the unknown, and it can build anxiety, which kind of links to mental health issues. But I do think there's something quietly going on behind the scenes, which I think we can take comfort and reassurance to know that this hobby has got some wonderful people in it who really do care about their animals. And I think I'm not so worried about the legislative side, because I think that there are decent people in government and that we can represent ourselves quite well. And I know that as the regulations change and we need to adapt, and it's very important that we are flexible to keep this hobby going, because 30 years of raising and breeding animals in small rubs is hard to break with, and I've only been doing it a couple of years, so for me I'm very open-minded and flexible. But I think if I had 30 years of breeding animals in smaller rubs, knowing that their health is actually doing quite well, but also knowing inside I think we can do better. And I think that these experiments are going to be very helpful, because I think it's either going to tell us one way or the other, and it's better to be self-regulated than it is to be regulated by others. I've learned that from my other profession, because in our accountancy profession, the Institute of Chartered Accountants regulate me and my business, and I quite like that, because we're self-regulating. There's still very strong regulations and very strong and strict principles of being ethics are very high. And I think in our industry we do have high standards and we do have high ethics amongst the community, and I think that bodes well for the future, because I think the way it will probably work, is my prediction, is that we'll become even more self-regulatory. And I think the more of us that can self-regulate, the better, and the more of us that can up our standards and up our ethics in the way we breed, the better the longevity of the hobby, I believe. I don't think it's going anywhere. Please, if they do bring in wider legislation, I do not think that it's going to lead to a crash in this market. I just don't believe it. I think this market's we're only scratching the iceberg of this market. I think, if anything, more and more hobbyists and people will come in when they see the standards and the high quality of what we're doing, I think it'll actually breed more business for us in the long term. I've always felt that in every aspect of business, that the higher the standards, the higher the ethics, the higher the opportunity there is to grow and expand this operation. And I think personally I'm going to feel a lot more comfortable. I'm going through this development phase right now, and it's my heart is telling me one thing, my mind is beginning to realize what's out there. And I do love channels like Lori's, because she, like I say, she's had years and years of studying behaviour of snakes, and it begs the question, why is she doing what she's doing? Why is she doing all these tests and experiments, and why is she gaining good momentum and following on her channel? I think it's because she's hitting a chord with people inside, and I think there's a lot of breeders inside like me who are thinking, I really do want to look at some alternatives, and I think that's really the way it's going to go. I think the other thing is that if the market was to crash, or say it was to drop down, we're at the point now, I think, where the market is starting to show strength. In other words, resilience. There's a lot of breeders out there who have the resources to adapt to any new regulations. There's also a lot of breeders that don't, and I understand that. And I think for many of us, it could mean that we've got to downscale our collection size if we're going to have to then expand our rub sizes or our viv sizes. But I think the good news is that we've got the capability of producing productive clutches from smaller sizes. So my plan anyway is to scale down. I mean, I don't want to be cleaning 160 animals every day. It's not part of my game plan. My game plan is to learn the hobby and then to scale down the workload, but actually to enjoy those animals and socialise with them more, but also to produce amazing morphs, so the hobby will hopefully pay for itself. I mean, I'm putting in quite a lot of time and energy right now, and we're only on our 3rd season. This is our 3rd season coming up, so we're very new to the hobby, but I'm going to restructure the way we do things, and I'm going to be very open-minded to the experiments that people are doing out there, and I'm going to do quite a few experiments here myself. So let's talk about how we can improve the mental health of our snakes as part of our husbandry. It's often, I think, it can be overlooked, but I think in actual fact, I don't think it is overlooked, because the number one priority for us in giving our snakes the best conditions is their husbandry. The physical husbandry actually is like us, for example. If we're living in a clean home and we're eating good food and we're exercising and we're socializing and we are intellectualizing, developing our brains. Now to me, there's 5 aspects to our lives. It's the physical, which is feeling good inside. There's the spiritual, which a lot of people overlook and don't realize, but we actually need to feed our spirits with good uplifting material, whether it's music, whether it's the spoken word, whether it's just good principles, whatever we have in life, whatever value system we have, we need to feed our value system. I call it a value system, if you like, what's inside us. But I mean, I think that's important. I think it's important to stretch ourselves intellectually, get the brain working, get the brain moving, kind of think outside the box, keep that stimulus going. I think that's really good for our health. And of course, there's the social side, which is having good friends around us and building friendships and family relationships and ties. I think on top of that, because I have a deep devotion to God and to my Saviour, for me, my well-being is also directly linked to my relationships with other people, but also to my relationship with Heavenly Father, which are both linked, because they just are. I mean, if we love and serve one another, we love our God. If we don't love and serve one another, we're not really showing much love for our God, because He taught us the principle that we must love Him and love each other. And so that's my little simple methodology for life, if you like, is get a balance in all those areas. And of course, the Saviour was the perfect role model for us. He was perfect in His sociability. He was perfect in His example. He is perfect in His love. He is perfect in His ability to use His brain and to use it wisely. Very, very interesting. You study His life, you learn so much about how many people tried to trap Him and ensnare Him and try to bring Him down, and He rose above it all, and He showed even more love. And I think this is why I'm so drawn to my Saviour, because He is the perfect role model. Now, of course, when you have that perfect role model, it doesn't stop in relationships with people. It continues into the whole of the animal life as well, meaning that I believe each of the animals and trees and plants in this world have a spirit, and they have a being, and they're all connected to us, which means when I use the force in my breeding and my keeping of snakes, that force field is my connection with every other living life out there, and therefore I have this extra sense, which is a spiritual awareness of what's going on. Even though I'm a baby in the industry, I don't really know what I'm doing completely because I'm still learning. I've got this beautiful gift, which is the gift of discernment, the gift of knowing and feeling without necessarily having perfect knowledge, if you get my drift. And it's like that sixth sense, and I'm working. I do follow it a lot, and it might seem really weird to a lot of people out there. Think, what is this guy on? You know, but it works, and it's worked for the whole of my life, and it works in every aspect of my life, and I follow it, and we'll see where it goes. I mean, please continue to follow on this journey. It's going to be very unique and very interesting because I don't know what's going to happen, because I'm going to be sensitive to the promptings of the force that's going to take me one way or the other. I'm still keeping a really close eye on what everyone else is doing because I think we can learn so much from each other. But that's just me, and that's just the way I am. But anyway, let's talk about our snakes. Let's talk about how we can help them and give them a lovely environment to live and thrive and to have mental stimulation as well. So the golden rule is always treat others as you'd like to be treated. So I apply that to the animal life as well. Give them good food, give them opportunity to exercise, give them the right environment and habitat. And that's the first thing. Is the 100% goal for me is to give my snakes the best possible husbandry that I can. And that covers things like getting your temperatures right, getting your humidity right. We're still working on that. By the way, we've had some more sheds and they've all come out pretty clean. We had a couple that were broken. So I know that my humidity probably needs to notch up another 10%, but I'm not having stuck sheds. So I know I'm not quite there yet, but we are moving in the right direction. Air quality, making sure there's good air quality in here. The enclosures, making sure the enclosures are big enough. I put hides in virtually every rub. I mean, I know our breeders won't do that, but I do, because since I've been doing it, I've seen an improvement in the welfare of the snakes. It is extra work, extra cleaning, and I think that's hard for big collections, but I've got 160 snakes and we still have virtually a hide in every single rub, and that's like their immediate home. They get the best of both worlds. They get an open daylight view of what's going on in the facility. When the natural light comes on and off, they know the day to dark. I can look in. They've got their hide, so they can still have that privacy and seclusion. And I just think that's probably one simple area where we're not talking about everyone going over to Viv's. Just literally think about putting a hide or even two hides in your enclosure, and you'll see a marked improvement in the welfare of your snakes, in my opinion. Obviously you've got to be careful, because you might have some big girls in some rubs that maybe putting in a hide might restrict their movement. So that tells me that you may have to increase the size of your enclosure. If you're putting in a hide and they're struggling to get around, then perhaps it's time to upgrade. The other thing to look at is, and this is quite topical here, is UV light. Now I know many breeders think we don't need it, and I thought that as well, but in my studies I've realized that there are other benefits to UVB light that go beyond the calcium that our snakes need, and it goes beyond the build up of that calcium, because obviously most of the calcium will come from the food anyway, as long as that food is full of good nutrients. So I'm going to do an experiment. When I build the playground, I'm going to be putting in a UVB light, and I'm going to be putting it on a very short time basis. It won't be for long, won't be for many hours. It might need to be for an hour or two a day. And I'm going to see how my snakes do. I'm not going to buy them sunglasses because I know that UVB light can also bring damage to our snakes as well. If it's too overly exposed, it can seriously damage the snake. So we've got to be careful that we go about this in the right way. But I am going to bring that in as an opportunity to see how that impacts on the experiment that I'm doing. I'm also going to experiment with food, so I'm going to be trying to move across more to smaller multis, trying to get away from those Norwegian fat rats, which have been completely okay, I think, for the majority of our snakes. But I do think that it's moving across to a more natural diet that they'll be used to. So in other words, trying to provide a more natural diet is a bit like us, really. I mean, if I had a choice between a nice fresh piece of bass with some new potatoes and some lovely green beans, which have been beautifully cooked by my wife, say, and she brings it to me and I look at that and I think, oh my goodness me, that is delicious. I just can't wait to eat it. On the other hand, if Mandy says to me, right, it's fish and chips, we're going to go down to the chippy, cod and chips, dripping in oil, chips that are dripping in oil, which are very tasty, by the way. I mean, I do love it, and we do still have fish and chips, and I think anyone that's been in the UK from the US and Canada will know how good our fish and chips are. You wouldn't want to eat that every day, because it would just be building up lots and lots of really bad fatty substances in our kidneys, and it won't be good for us. But the occasional meal like that once a week isn't a problem. In fact, some professional trainers actually recommend having one trash meal a week. It actually stirs up the whole of your system and gets you going, and apparently it's a good clear out. So yeah, it's interesting. But anyway, I think with the snakes, I think we've got to look at our budget, we've got to look at the availability, and also some states, some parts of the world don't allow multis. Therefore you are restricted, so you've got to work within your parameters. But if you've got access to multis and you've got the cash flow to afford them or breed them, then I think that could be a good move to help your snakes. Handling, knowing when to handle, when not to handle, is a very important part of husbandry. Making sure that your hands are clean, making sure that your hands are cold enough that you're not going to overheat the snake with your warm hands. So it's also knowing and being respectful. When we handle fish, we catch fish and we return them, we're very careful not to lift the fish out of the water. We keep that special film on those fish so that when they return virtually unscathed. And it's beautiful to see a fish being returned, and how you handle that fish determines how that fish does. And I think it's the same with our snakes. We've got to be sensitive to their needs and how we handle them. Of course, the other thing, of course, is medication. Having the right medication when things go wrong, and being able to treat them with the right medication and the right treatments is also part of good husbandry. So I think that covers the basics of mental health for our snakes, is that they're going to be a lot happier as we get all those parameters balanced and as we learn how to adjust our systems. And then the next question, of course, is do we go for a rub, do we go for a viv, or do we go for a rub viv? Or what kind of enclosure do we go for? And there's a big debate in the industry as to whether one method is better than another. And I think the reality is most breeders go for the rub system because I think it's a lot more convenient. It shows that the animals can do well in these rub systems. But I do think there is a little bit more we can do. And I think it's really good to see so many other breeders looking at things like rub, viv, combined approaches, which are out there. They are available at the moment. And also people building up areas for our snakes to have enrichment, I think is very good. So you might get away with a compromise between the two, where you have an area for your snakes to have enrichment over and beyond their enclosure if it's a rub system. But in doing so, if you're going to set up a slightly larger enclosure with lots of climbing branches and you've got all the flora in there and everything else that you want to put in there, there is a way of doing that, which is safety for our snakes. And I think the thing that we've got to bear in mind is that when we decide to go for a terrarium or a vivarium, is to make sure that we're thinking very carefully about, if a snake climbs, is it going to fall and hurt itself? Therefore, a lot of people use wood that is laid on flat wood. And they also use very simple plastic hides or easy to clean hides. They use plastic planting, so it's easy to clean and wash. They use very simple substrate. Some people go straight into what they call biodiversity in their terrariums and vivariums, and I think that could be a mistake to do that straight away. I think it's probably better to go for an easy to clean, easy to get functionality right, and as we develop in the hobby, start to think about the cleanup crews that we can put in there, start to think about an ecosystem that is going to work for us. And I think many breeders, many keepers have gone that route and they've been very successful. But I think there's a danger that we could end up trying to learn things too quickly here, and I think maybe learning how to keep them in a slightly larger enclosure in safety in mind would be a good stepping stone to then experiment with the biodiversity approach, which is far more complex, and it's well worth doing the research on it. So we've also got to be careful on safety in mind that the snakes aren't choking on their new substrate, because that can be a real threat. We've got to make sure we're using the right substrate, that it's not dangerous for the animal. We've got to make sure that the branches are set up in such a way that they're not going to fall and hurt themselves. We need to look at the heat sources, because often there's a new heat source, and we've got to be careful that the light and heat sources do not burn our animals. So there is a lot of risk in going for a slightly larger enclosure, and it can actually cause extra stress and worry for our snakes, and could be detrimental even if we get it wrong. So we need to be really, really careful on how we go about creating the new heat source, new light sources. And I will show you at the end, Lori's got a beautiful video out that she talks about her do-it-yourself enclosure, and she's set up a very safe enclosure for her snakes, and she explains how she went about doing it. And if we've got time at the end, I'd like to show you a clip of her video and encourage you to go onto her channel and have a look. The next thing to look at is check with your mentor as well. In other words, if you're new to the hobby and you're thinking about doing this, it's a very good idea to speak to someone that understands behavioural science in our snakes, someone that has some experience. And I think Lori, she's very good. I mean, she's got loads of good videos. She puts 2 or 3 videos out a week. She gives you up-to-date, real information, experiments that she's been doing for years. So she's not a newcomer to the behavioural side. She's doing a master's degree in it. So I think I can honestly recommend her highly, because we're talking about someone that really has a lot of practical experience, but she has the theory to back it too. And of course, good theory leads to good practice, and therefore I'm going to just commend her to you. And I'm really enjoying her channel. I'm learning so much from her. So thank you, Lori, for that. It's Lori Torrini is her name, and I'll put the links on this channel. So we talked about the difference between a natural viv and a simple viv. I would keep it simple to start with and then move over to the more naturalistic as we improve in those skills. The other thing is, for safety, we can look at things like putting in multi-levels. So instead of actually having, one tree branch going upwards they can climb, is to actually have levels where they can perch, so the snakes can perch. Also giving them enough cover and flora so that they feel secure. Snakes are ball pythons particularly, can feel very insecure if they haven't got enough hiding spaces. And I think the key is to perhaps have quite a lot of clutter in your terrarium or your vivarium to make sure that there's always a hiding space for your snakes. One of the things I'm learning, and like today, 3 of my snakes wanted to come and play, and I just opened up the rubs and they spent 10-15 minutes supervised, just literally chilling on the outside of their rub. And some of them wanted to climb, some of them just wanted to chill. Given them 5-10 minutes of just perching on the edge of their rub with me supervising, I noticed and studied their behaviour, and within 5-10 minutes they were happy, content that they weren't imprisoned, and they went back into their rubs and they were happy as punch. I think it's really interesting that snakes want to test us a little bit and see, I want to see where I am and how much freedom I really have. And I think if we give them that freedom, that really does help with their mental health, because they think to themselves, I've got an owner that's very discerning, he's looking at what I want, he's allowing me the freedom to come out, now he's allowing me the freedom to go back. And I just think it's a very simple practice that I'm doing, which I think is actually helping the welfare of my snakes. Obviously we've got to give them safe climbing opportunities. We can also rearrange furniture. Now, if we rearrange furniture within the vivarium, I think that adds stimuli to the snake, because it's a bit like us. You know how we've got a bedroom that's been decorated and we love the way it's looking, and then after 3 years we think, I want to change, I want to spring clean, I want something new and exciting, I want to change my environment, I want something to spice up my life. I think it's the same with our snakes. I think if they've got a boring square to live in, I'm thinking to myself, what must be doing their heads in? Like, I'm sure these snakes like to have that enrichment. I'm convinced of it, that they've got personalities, and I'm convinced that they want enrichment. So I think that what we can do is we can rearrange their enclosure, and it's fun for us as well, because we can get creative. I mean, I'm looking at some of these experiments at the moment and I think, wow, that looks great. You've got Richard Predator BP that's given us an example of how to set up vivs. You've got Rob, who's just recently put out a lovely video, by the way. I want to give Rob a shout out because he put out a great video yesterday which I really enjoyed. It hit a chord with me, and I just think it's wonderful that we're seeing so many really good breeders being willing enough to experiment, to see for themselves what's going on, because I think it's very new to us, all this, and I think it's just lovely that we can be pioneers in learning how to best provide for our snakes. So what other things can we talk about? Obviously I love my fogger, I love my bathing and foggers are good for enrichment and for health, and using them at the right time is a good thing. And obviously breeding responsibly is also a very important part of mental welfare, because we wouldn't necessarily want our snakes to breed every year. And I think it's wrong for us to expect our snakes to go through such a massive change in their biology every year in, year out. And I actually think that we need to kind of constrain ourselves a little bit and be self-disciplined. And I have this year. I mean, I've got probably 10 of my girls that gave me beautiful clutches last year that I'm resting, and they might be big enough to go this year, but I just don't feel comfortable with it, and I've decided to rest. And I believe I'll get blessed, they'll get blessed, they'll get in better condition, and when they go in the following season, I believe we're going to end up with bigger clutches, probably to the point where we'll get less slugs. We'll probably end up with 10 or 12 eggs instead of maybe 4 with a couple of slugs. So I think it's sometimes a false economy to think that we've got to bang out eggs every year with these animals. If we start exploiting them and using them to that level, it does beg the question as to why we're doing this. Because if it were driven by money and that's our only sole reason that we're doing it, then I think that's really sad. But I think if we say, you know what, that beautiful girl gave us a lovely clutch last year, I'm going to give her a good 2 years rest and then see where we go in the future. Anyway, just a food for thought. That's my opinion. I'm going to just have enough time to show you a little bit of Lori's video on her do-it-yourself. Enjoy. We'll end with Lori. Have a lovely weekend, everyone. Thank you for your love and support. Keep being positive with the hobby. I know it's going to develop and it's going to change, but I think it's going to change for the better. But I'm just going to pass you now over to Lori.
This enclosure is a result of me just experimenting with a plastic tub. It's made by Sterilite. These are Draco portals that I got from Specialty Enclosure Designs. The screen vents I ordered off Amazon.com, and I think they're 2-inch diameter or 2.5-inch diameter. And this tub is 40 inches long and 18 inches high. The snake that's testing it out for me is a 2-year-old Papuan carpet python that I got from Eric Burke at EB Morelia. His name is Moondor, and he has tested out several enclosures for me. He's usually a really good sport about it. That elevated hide is from Reptile Basics. Those ledges are from Mag Naturals, and they're attached to the side via magnets. That light that he's looking at is an Arcadia T5 12-inch long UVB fixture with a shade dweller bulb in it. It does not produce enough heat to bother the plastic or burn the animal. I tested this out thoroughly before putting it in the enclosure. I left it turned on directly on some plastic for several hours, and it didn't do any damage. And then I'm able to actually touch that bulb with my bare hand and it doesn't burn. The PVC perches are 1-inch PVC with 1-inch end caps, and they're attached with adhesive hooks to the sides of the tub. The left side of the tub contains all of his enclosure furnishings from his previous enclosure, and this side of the tub is aspen bedding, and it's kept dry. In the center of the tub is a humid hide with damp sphagnum moss in it, and on top of that is a black rounded hide that's covering the hole down into the humidity box. The right side of the tub has cypress mulch in it and his water dish, and that side of the tub I'm able to keep a little damp in case he likes that. I think you could easily make this enclosure bioactive or put live plants in it. I, however, am just using fake foliage in here at the moment. And while I do have some natural substrates in the tub, I don't have anything alive in it other than the animal. This is just an overall view of it, and it was sitting on top of a 4-foot-long enclosure, just as a reference. One of Moondor's favorite enclosure furnishings are these shelves.
Well, thank you very much, Laurie, for sharing that with us. And I'm sure everyone will have slightly different approaches, and there may be things that we can do to adjust that even further. And I welcome all your love and feedback. See you over the weekend. Have a great weekend, and we're sending you lots of love from Paul, Jared, and the family.